Hello and welcome back to CST 2120. So in this lecture, I'm going to explain, sort of how you can use HTML to build a website. I kind of had the introduction, right, showing you how to set up the development environment. Now it's about, actually hands-on, let's code some different elements and tags, yeah? So what I'm going to show you in this lecture should be enough to build a basic front end for Course 1, but it's only a starting point. HTML, it's not complicated, but there are many more tags than the ones I've shown you in this video. So you need to follow tutorials and do some practice to kind of consolidate your knowledge and discover more. So these are the tags I'm going to cover in this video. So links, images, lists and tables, div and span, buttons and inputs, and then we're going to bring it all together with a simple sort of live coded example of, where I'll show you how to basically put together a simple website with HTML, yeah? All right, let's start with links. After all, it's the hypertext markup language, yeah? And rather confusingly, links are known as anchors in HTML. So if you remember that they're called anchors, that'll help you remember that it's the A tag used to create links. So we've got different types of links. We can link between websites. We can do from one page to another page on the same website, one part of the page to another, and there's things like email links as well, yeah? Now, when you're doing links, it's helpful to understand the difference between absolute URLs and relative URLs. So absolute URL, where URL is called a uniform resource locator, is the full address of the web page. Yeah? So if you know the absolute URL, you just put it in the browser, and wherever you are, it'll be able to find it through the domain system or through the file system. Yeah. So basically, absolute URLs are the full path to the page, whether that's on the file system or through the domain name system. If we've got like example.com or intro.mdx.ac.uk. Yeah. Relative URLs are used when linking within the same website, yeah? So they specify the location of one page or resource relative to the current page, yeah? So I can link to, so for example, if this is a relative URL here, right, it's linking to page 2 HTML, which is in the same folder, the same file system as the page that I'm linking from, yeah? I could also link to a subfolder from where the current page is running, or we could also link by using the .. we can go up a directory and link to something in the directory above the file that we're currently running, yeah? So relative URLs are always moving up or down the file system, sort of into folders, out of folders, and it's always relative to where the current file is, yeah? And although they might seem more complicated, you should actually use them wherever possible, because it's going to make your website much easier to deploy on a server. Yeah, if you put the full URL like HTTP localhost 8080/pages/index or whatever, then when you deploy it on a server, that'll break because the full URL, the absolute URL, will have changed. Yeah, if you use relative URLs, wherever you put your website folder, you can always move up or down a directory within that same file system, so it doesn't really matter where it's deployed. So usually it's much better to use relative URLs whenever you can. Links, we use the A tag, anchor tag, remember, so we can do absolute URL, relative URL, or email. It has a special kind of mail to : thing there, yeah? And we can link to, remember I mentioned classes and IDs in a previous lecture, so we can do linking within the page using the ID attribute. So if we give certain paragraphs an ID attribute, for example, then we can just use the hash before them, which is used as part of, it's basically a CSS selector, which we'll come to in a later lecture. Okay, so let's create some links, yeah? So here's my boilerplate, remember the HTML tags, the head tag, the body tag. The HTML content goes here, okay? So let's start by going live on this, yeah? So if you remember, going live means the browser will automatically refresh the page whenever I make changes, which makes the development much quicker and easier. I've got a really small screen I'm recording on here, so it's not quite as good as it would be on a bigger screen, but you kind of get the idea. Okay, so now we can add some links, yeah? So let's put an href equals HT. See all these short HTTP. I'm going to type it blind s https google.co.uk. So that's the link, that's where the link goes to, yeah? And then we can type, link to Google here, for example. Yeah. So if we save that, it's automatically refreshing. There's our link in the page, and we click through to it, and it takes us to Google. Yeah. So that's working nicely. Yeah. So that's our absolute URL. We're linking just to another website here. Let's create another web page. We'll call this registration. And then, as usual, put in the boilerplate. Remember, just do HTML5 here. We'll give it a title, registration will do, and then we'll just save that. And then on our index page, we can link within the website to a href equals, see the IDE VS Code registration. Yep. Okay, so we'll save that. And so here we got link to Google. Now it's added this link to registration. We click on that. You can see here we've gone into the registration page there. Yeah, so that's a link within the website. And what was the third one I wanted to do? Oh, no, link location within the same page. Yeah. So if we want to link within the page, like going down the page for sort of maybe a single page design, something like that, then we need to insert the anchor point. So we might have a paragraph with an ID equals news or something. So this is the news. Okay, so we've added our news. Let's just bring up that as well. So now I've got the news section here. And then to link down to that, when we have not got, the page isn't really long enough to do it properly, but anyway, it'll do href equals, then we use the hash here. This is CSS selected, indicates the ID, and news section, let's say, yeah, okay. So now if we click on news section, I mean, it doesn't do anything. We need a load of, let's put a load of breaks in here. Come to div later, but let's just put a load of breaks. Okay, save that. So now the news is further down on the page. Now we click on the news section, it brings up the news section. Yeah. Ignore that rather unpleasantness. Okay. So I think that shows you how we can link within the page, within the page, within the same website, and to external websites. Okay, so images. We use the img tag for images. It doesn't have a closing tag, so we might just have, source equals images. And again, we have to get the relative. We can use relative or absolute URLs here. This is relative. I've created a folder called images, which you should always do to keep your website nicely organized, and put all your images in there. The alt attribute here is used for screen readers, but also used for web scrapers, this kind of stuff. And it basically says what the image is in human language. Yeah, so cat in this case, because it's a cat. Yeah. You can set the width and height on image. So it's a little bit hacky, but you can basically control the size. Just try not to make a. If you've got a really big image, don't make it tiny using width and height, because the user's still going to wait for that page to load. It's going to load the big image and shrink it down, which is really inefficient. Yeah. So ideally, you'd use the width and height to make the image appear at the same size at which it actually is. Yeah. Don't resize small images to large sizes, because that's going to create, it'll look bad. Yeah. And don't create lots of network loading time by getting massive images and scaling them down using width and height. Yeah, but much better to use Photoshop or a similar tool to kind of get the image looking just right at the width and height you want it to be able to be seen. Yeah. Images must be right format: JPEG, GIF, PNG. Those are very standard formats. There's a few other ones these days. Create them in Camera or SVG editor like Inkscape. And then obviously Photoshop or GIMP are good for editing the image, changing the contrast, brightness, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And always put images in a separate folder to keep your website tidy, files tidy. Yeah. So this is kind of what I was saying earlier. Your image should, be ideally the right center at the size that it's displayed. Yeah. Don't squash down massive images, because that's just wasting network, bandwidth. And don't blow images up or they'll look terrible. Yeah. And there are progressive loading formats, like JPEG supports that, so you kind of get like a grainy picture of the image first, and then it gradually looks better over time. Yeah, as more of the data loads. Yeah, so that's also worth considering if you're dealing with images a lot. Yeah. So just a quick demo. Images aren't very complicated except for the stuff I said. So let's get rid of that. So here I have a folder called images, okay, and I've downloaded a picture of a cat here just as an example. So from a relative URL perspective, the image is in the image. These files are here. So to get that image, this file here needs to go into images/cat JPEG. Yeah? So let's just put it on the page, image, and then source equals cat.jpg. Oh, images cats.jpg. That's right, I think. I don't know why it hasn't recognizes it. Right, and then let's see if that's loaded it, which it has, and it's obviously a massive file, so it's loaded at a huge size. We need to put an alt tag in here. It's kind of required for image tags. And then let's just scale it down a bit. Width equals, I don't know, 100. So if we can sort of squash it that way. And if we change the height differently, it's automatically scaled it to the same ratio. We could do height equals 20 or something. So then it's kind of squashed it. Yeah. So very easy. It's really just a matter of getting images the right sort of size for your website. And you can tweak the width and height if you need to there. Yeah. So for this course, it doesn't really matter if you use copyrighted images because you're not sharing your coursework with other people. It's a private project. If you do put your coursework online as part of your portfolio, you should make sure there's no copyright in there. Yeah, the copyrighted images in there. Yeah. Okay, lists are easy. Sometimes we need to make things 1, 2, and 3, or use bullet points. We just use this OL or UL tags. And then LI refers to the items on each line of the list. Yeah, I'll do a little demo of this anyway. Yeah, tables are easy as long as you're not trying to have multiple, cells spanning multiple columns or multiple rows. Yeah, then it gets a bit more fiddly. But a straightforward table where you just got rows and it's like basically all the rows have the same number of cells and all the columns have the same number of cells. Then that's pretty easy. Yeah, you just use the table tag. And then each line is organized using the TR, table row, and then we've got table headers or table data in to define the actual cells. Yeah. Tables are designed for tables. They're not designed for organizing your whole page. So don't use tables to try and do some kind of layout with a nav bar and stuff. That's not appropriate use of tables. You've got CSS grids for that, which are much better for that. So use CSS grids for organizing your page and tables for tabular data, and nothing else really. Yeah. So here's a simple example. So we've got the table tags wrapping the whole thing. Then each row is defined using these TR tags. And then we got the table headers and the TD is table data. Yeah? I'd make sure these match, the number of cells in each row match. Otherwise you've got to do fiddly stuff with row span and col span, this kind of stuff. Yeah, which I'm not covering here. So let's just do a little demo. Just, in the spirit of all this, let's just pull that up. Yeah. So let's put a table together here. Okay, so just use the table tags, wrap the whole thing, and then we might have a couple of rows. One row there, for example, and another row there. And each row then will have a certain number of cells. Cells here are table headers. So for first header, and then we can have second header. And then we can run OTD or something, first data. I'm using the VS Code shortcuts here just to save time. Second data, okay, that'll probably work. Now that's fine. You can't see the borders of the table because that's like a CSS thing. We need to put some CSS in to define the border color and border thickness and all that kind of stuff. But you can see here, we've got the headers here and then the data there, yeah? Let's just quickly do a list. Just do a bullet ordered list. So again, it's very simple, right? You just have the list items are here, item 1 or something, and then duplicate the wrong thing there, yeah. Item, and then we can have item 2. Okay, so you can hear item 1, item 2, and if we change this to UL, we'd end up with bullet points, yeah. Like that. So not complicated. Next tags I want to talk about are div and span. So they don't do much. They very like they don't define a paragraph or a heading and all that kind of thing. But they usually use to define blocks of HTML, format it in a way, have a particular ID, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So we can use them for structuring the page to some extent. You know, before the nav tag came along, we probably use that to define the navigation area. But there's lots of things that aren't defined in pre-existing HTML tags. In that case, you might use div to kind of wrap up a block of HTML, or span to format a bit of HTML in a certain way, or make it show and hide it using JavaScript, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So usually structuring the page, defining parts of the page for styling, and inserting dynamic content. Yeah. We could create the entire page with just div and span together, but obviously HTML has other tags just to make it easier than, you know, doing everything with CSS. Yeah. Important difference between div and span is that div is a block element. So after every div element, after the closing of every div element, there'll be a line break. Yeah. Whereas span is an inline element, and that just so it doesn't add a line break after the end of the span tag. That's an important distinction. Yeah. So here we've got you know, div usually doing the navigation, for example, and then after the end of this div tag, there's a return mark, and then we could, you know, chuck a bunch of links in there if we wanted, or whatever we wanted to do. Yeah. Whereas here with a span, this end of the span tag's here, and as it happens, that's the end of the text. But I'll show you an example where that isn't. But there isn't a return mark here. We could have other text going along here, and this is be useful in this case for inserting dynamic content when this person gets the answer, you know, 5 out of 10 or something. We could give them when they get the right answer, they could put the answer in here dynamically using JavaScript. Okay, let's have a quick demo. Okay, and let me pull up that. Okay, so I'm actually going to zoom out of this a little bit. Yeah, just make it a little clearer. All right, div and span. Yeah, so div is just some, you know, hello there. Okay. Okay, so that's hello there. Now, if we do, just to show you the difference between the blocks and the line element and the. So if we have a couple of these, then one appears after the other. Yeah. Now, if on the other hand, if we have a span, hello, span, are you there, for example? You can see here the span is ending here and there, but there's no return mark being added because span is an inline element. Yeah, it's not a line element, what we're called. Yeah, it's an inline element. Yeah, so in that case, we're not getting a return mark here. So if we wanted dynamically with JavaScript to change that, we could give this an ID and then do that. And then we use div to kind of organize blocks of HTML on the page normally. Yeah. In cases where there isn't an HTML tag that's obviously better. Yeah. Next thing I want to cover is buttons and inputs. So buttons often used for, like, you know, triggering, you know, starting a game, logging in or out, registering, this kind of stuff. You can also use buttons for navigation, but I personally think anchors are better for that. Yeah. But you can kind of format an anchor to look a bit buttony, or format a button to look a bit anchory. You know, these things are a little bit blurry. Yeah. So a simple button would be like button tag here, where we have what you see on the button appearing between the opening and closing button tags. Inputs used to get data from the user. So typically and sort of historically, inputs are put inside forms and then we submit the form. For this module, I kind of don't recommend you use forms. I mean, I kind of explain, there's a separate video on forms. But as a general rule, it's easier just using inputs and JavaScript and buttons rather than messing around with forms. Yeah. So lots of different inputs types, and these are very powerful because you can use the input type to control the data you get from the user. Yeah. Users enter, you know, lots of wrong stuff in the wrong places, and your job as a website developer is to try and constrain the user so that they put the right data in the right places, and then that's good for them and good for you as the kind of website administrator as well. Yeah. So always try and constrain the type of data that the users enter. If you're asking them for a number, don't just use a text field, because then if they type a text, you know, a character in there, then that's going to end up with some incorrect data. Yeah. If they're entering a date, use the input type date, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Here's a few examples. There's actually quite a lot of different input types, We've got things like text, where it's just like free text kind of thing, any character. Numbers, the user can only type numbers. You've got passwords where they can't, avoid sort of shoulder snooping, whatever it is. And then we've got dates, where if you click on it, it gives you a date picker. Yeah. With inputs, when you're using JavaScript, you're going to try and access the value of the input. And you can also specify default value. So here you've got value equals David. If you do that, then the input's like pre-filled with the value David. Yeah? When you're testing your website, you'll find it very useful to use default values of your inputs, because then you don't have to endlessly type in a really complicated password to see if the password checking is working, for example. And you could just, at a certain stage of development, using default values will save you a lot of time. Okay, so let's just create a little demo just to wrap this going kind of thing. All right, so buttons dead easy, just like button press me or something. Okay, it's a button, and with registration, whatever, what we'd usually do is attach a JavaScript event to it by giving an attribute like on click, so that when it's clicked, it'll launch a particular JavaScript function, like say hello, and I'll show you all this later. Yeah, but that's the typical use of buttons, where we've got a JavaScript event handler on them. Yeah. Inputs, let's just do a quick one. So supposing we're building a sort of registration form, we might have something like, we might probably use a div element to organizing it, and then we have something like name, and then we put an input, type equals text, and we probably have a value here equals spelt right, or it's not going to work, equals what's his name, David or something like that. Yep. So there's our inputs, and so if we're building a form, we could just add more elements here, maybe put a break element here, so we've got them lined up nicely after each other. Yeah. And obviously you can change this to password, for example, and then it's changed into a password type. Yeah. So look up the types and get used to them. There's only about 4 or 5 you probably ever need. Yeah. Okay, so the last part of this video, I'm just going to basically code up very quickly a very simple website showing you, all the elements that I've explained so far. Yeah. Obviously, it's going to be missing some stuff. It's really just an illustrative thing. Yeah. So VS Code, we can zoom out a little bit, which I'm going to do so we can see what's going on. And there's my website at the bottom, which I'm going to zoom out on as well a bit. Yeah. So it's all a bit clearer what's going on. Yeah. So we've got index, registration. I don't know, let's call it, game or something. Create some pages, right? That's the first step. Yeah. I think probably we'll create one working navigation bar and then copy and paste it to the others. Yeah. So we're going to use a nav tag for that because that's sort of the most sensible. And then we want 3 links for this page, right? I've got a href equals, whatever it was, game. Sorry, let's do home first. Index HTML. And then this is home. Remember, the index page has to be the home page. Then we'll copy those and edit those to make them game. And then the other one was registration, right? Okay, and we'll change the names. So that's game and that's registration. Yep. Okay, so we've got our 3 links there. When we come on CSS, we'll use CSS to style those and make them look a bit more pretty. Yeah. Now, before the navigation, maybe we want to have, I don't know what I did there. We probably want to have maybe a title, right? So maybe for the moment, I'll just use H1. This is, which page am I editing here? Index. So this is my game website or something like that. Yeah, okay. So now we've got a sort of title, probably put a logo there, got our links there nicely. And then this is the index page. So, let's just do a little sort of H2 maybe. And again, it looks ugly because we're not using any CSS here. So this would be home, P, have a great time on our website, whatever. Yep. Okay. So got a home page on our home contents, and we've got a navigation bar. Let's just test the navigation. That's fine. That's fine. So navigation is all working. Now we've got an unfortunate bit of copying and pasting here. Once you've got this right on one page and we're happy with the design on one page, then I recommend you copy and paste the bits you need. we could use PHP to avoid this copying, but for this project, there's only 5 pages, so I think it's okay. Yeah, that's in the wrong place. That's going to generate HTML errors. So now we've got my game website on registration and my game website on there. Okay, so now we've got basically game registration, 3 pages, and registration. I'll just put this in for illustration. So then we might have something like H2. And what we probably put on H2 would be, just seeing, yes, doing live refresh. We'd probably have a form, wouldn't we, with the input stuff that I covered just a little bit earlier. So then we have something like name, and then have our input here, type equals text, value equals, this is the default value, remember. You wouldn't use David, obviously, in a real website. Okay, so we got name, and then we'll maybe password, right? Input type equals, probably David's not the best password. And then we'll probably have a button as well, yeah? Button, usually we have a JavaScript event, but we'll call that register button, yeah, okay. So here we've got a field. We can obviously lay it out as we like here with our default values. And then when we click on this register button, it would generate a JavaScript event that would extract the data from these input fields and store them in local storage, run some checks on them and store them in local storage, yeah? So I think we kind of got enough here, so you can see HTML is not hard, right? I've kind of got my 3 pages here. Obviously you might need a couple more. And one of these pages got the registration form, the game we'll come to later, yeah? It's all implemented with JavaScript. And we can make this thing look pretty. And if we wanted, I don't know, on the game page, why not on the game page? I've only got a picture of a cat, but that'll do. So let's wrap this up in a div, something like play the cat game, and then image source equals images cat. We're not going to bother the alt for the moment. Play the cat game. Oh yeah, width and height. Let's do width equals 100. That'll do. Yep. Okay. So now if we go to game, we got play the cat game, and if we wanted to put that on the next line, we could just use a break tag like that, something like that. It's not brilliant, but it'll do. Yeah. Okay. So this is the skeleton that we could then build on, and develop the full front end for coursework 1. Yeah, as well as coursework 2, of course. Okay, so this lecture has basically been introducing the basic common HTML tags, yeah? Showing them how to use them to build a simple website. And so learn how to do that basic version first, then learn the CSS, and then you can start properly building your front end for coursework 1. So we're only giving a brief introduction to HTML in this module. You get books like that with all the details of HTML. Really, the idea is, HTML is not the main part of this module. It's more about JavaScript, but you need to know enough HTML to be able to build the front end of a website. So just follow tutorials, have a practice, and then, move on to CSS and move on to JavaScript. This is a very nice book on HTML and CSS, and you can get it, read it for free online through the Middlesex University library, yeah? And it's sort of a very pretty book explaining the different tags and how HTML and CSS work in some detail, yeah? So you can follow the tutorials, there's some tutorials on the course website, or you could also just work your way through this book, which will help you, in a nice way, I think, learn HTML and CSS. That's it.